So lunch at the Roundtable here at Counseling Solutions. It's Lynette signing in.
Debbie. Tiffany.
And today's topic is cognitive dissonance. It was a Mr. Leon Bastinger who initially introduced the term late 1950s, maybe 1956, 1957. And by definition, it is the inconsistent thoughts or beliefs or attitudes, especially in relation to behaviors and decisions and attitude changes. This is very near and dear here at Counseling Solutions because we often focus on the narcissist who's in a relationship with the borderline and the borderline who's attracted to the narcissist. So it all ties in together at the end of the day. So with no further ado, we'll turn to Miss Debbie and then we'll get the thing going.
Well, I think the first thing that really got my attention on this is that the word dissonance. Dissonance means lack of harmony. So dissonance means that something that's unequal, working against itself, very dialectical in nature.
Yes.
So if we're looking at our attitudes and our beliefs, and they're not in harmony with what we believe and what we do. So if I say that my belief is that this tree out here should grow forever and never be cut down, and then the next day I'm out there cutting that tree. And you're going to say, like, what's up? You are having cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
Because what you said about the tree is not what you're doing about the tree.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts on that?
I find that is the crux of a lot of the frustration coming in counseling. Because let's say somebody realizes that they don't believe it, and then they're functioning in an environment where they're going against it often, it creates a lot of that dissonance. I think turns into guilt, can turn into shame. It can turn into, I grew up believing this, but I don't necessarily know why I believe it, so I'm acting this way. So it can turn into a whole cycle of environment that then they come in just not, you feel almost, I almost picture like going in the merry-go-round. You're just not sure where to stop. You're not sure where to start, you're not sure where to stop, and you can't make heads or tails of it.
It's like a forced compliance at the end of the day.
So if I'm trying really hard to be consistent with what I do and what I believe,
Yes.
then is that going to help or hurt the level of dissonance that I experience?
But first you have to define what you believe in and understand it. And understand who's deciding what you believe.
How would I not know what I believe?
I think sometimes we don't stop. Sometimes we act and we don't stop to define, to understand.
Like impulsive
Yeah.
behaviors.
Yeah.
So
Or
we react
program.
instead of respond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or programmed behaviors. Like programmed behaviors, let's say if we start from something that's become comfortable. And so we don't want to get out of the comfort, but we don't necessarily like the cycle. Does that make sense?
It does.
So it is a reactionary. It's not proactive, it's reactive. So the goal is to make it more proactive.
Okay.
When we talk about dissonance, the flip to that is called cognitive consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we're looking at congruence or congruency in terms of our beliefs and our attitudes within that are in alignment with what is quote unquote comfortable or normal to us based upon what we know and believe to be right.
So we have consistency, which is the opposite of dissonance.
Absolutely.
And is that the dialectic?
It is.
Okay.
It is. That's the big disconnect there
Okay.
when it comes into that. And something that was fascinating to me, being exposed to borderlines now and the notion of being attracted to a particular personality. And it was interesting to me when researching this topic, the narcissist popped up.
Always.
That was so interesting to me, was the narcissist. And what came to mind with respect to the narcissist and the borderline in a relationship, you have borderlines that hit a spectrum. You have the very strong personality, very strong, very rebuttal by way of resistant to what it is that the other person may want out of them, by way of behaviors. And then you have the person who may be a little bit more submissive. And this is where the narcissist really takes over and really pushes the envelope. That was interesting to me. Very interesting.
How does that cause dissonance?
Going back to the known beliefs that that individual has that's on the other side of that relationship, the borderline in this instance, having a very strong foundation, but then being overshadowed and overpowered by that personality of the narcissist being maybe a bit stronger or bigger than theirs. And knowing that this isn't right, this isn't love, this isn't how I should be treated, yet I stay.
Yeah.
And the reasonable mind, it just does not kick in and say go.
Okay.
It stays there. We see that here.
Yeah.
So cognitive dissonance, the definition is when we have inconsistency between values, beliefs, and actions. Okay? And so what happens is that when we realize the incongruency, that maladaptive behaviors begin to occur. Okay?
By maladaptive, you mean just for definition's sake, if somebody doesn't know what that means.
Not adaptive.
Harmful, maybe? Harmful,
Yes, harmful and not adaptive.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yes. It's like a discrepancy. A discrepancy occurs between what I believe and what I do. And I can see that so much, like with the borderline. At the beginning of an experience working with the borderline, one of the first things we do is we try to do some information, psychoeducation about what borderline personality is. And there are some really good books out there you can download off of Kindle, off of ebook, actually for free, and give you a startling base of where to start with the psychoed. One of the books it's one of the Bibles of BPD, Walking on Eggshells. It's a classic. It's been around for quite a while, and some of the stuff in it's outdated. But it's a very clear painting of what BPD, or they originally thought it was. And it's a little scary. It's a little scary, the way it's written. And so reading that initially, I think gets our attention and makes us ask a lot of questions. And I think it also helps point the picture of, or to draw the picture of the environment that fostered such behavior. What normally happens though with my women, with my clients, is that that's where the cognitive dissonance usually begins. Because they become very uncomfortable and very bothered with the fact that this is my mother, that's not me. Uh-oh. That's me. I'm not my mother. I can't have this because my mother had it. And that's usually what opens the door for therapy.
Absolutely. One of the notes that came up was, the attitude and how change takes place, and putting forth the effort to make those changes once, it's been identified that there is some dissonance going on there. And it's more or less leaning towards changing one or more attitudes. And in therapy, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not instantaneous. It doesn't just manifest out of thin air. It's a time event where it doesn't go quickly. And it's to understand that it is a process and it takes time, because once we develop an attitude or a belief that may not necessarily be in alignment with what it should be, for lack of a better word, I don't like to use should because it's such a mutable word, but things that bring a person to a place where change is needed. And it starts with those beliefs and those attitudes. Almost like if you learn a bad habit, you have to unlearn it. And the behavior, certain things, and knowing how to cope with them and manage them. That was interesting. Second was acquire new information. Bad information is put out sometimes, and in relationships, and people fall prey and victim to it, especially with the narcissist taking control.
Yeah.
But it's seeking information and knowledge for self in order to gain a better perspective, which helps with the change in attitude, and also reduce the importance of the cognition by way of looking at where you are and the acceptance again, and realizing, okay, this is going on, and then finding an approach that is feasible and comfortable for the person to come away from those bad behaviors that aren't necessarily the most healthy by way of mind, behavior, and actions. That impulsiveness, particularly I think of people in relationships, again with the borderline, sometimes they're in that relationship where they will seek affection where they're not getting it at home. And a lot of times affection is misinterpreted by way of sex, which introduces promiscuity in some of these relationships, which is a rabbit hole all in itself to lead to some very dark places.
If we come back on those and kind of maybe talk about some examples of each one.
Well, and this may or not be an example of each one, but it's a piece of, you mentioned the shoulds and the acceptance. That to me is huge. Whether it's with borderline or with even, like I specialize in Christian counseling. I see it hugely there. The idea of this should not be this way. And when we come down to it, it's who says it shouldn't be that way, and sometimes it's as simple as I don't want it to be that way. My parents said it shouldn't be that way. This is where I think it's helpful to decide what you believe, even in religion, what you believe and why you believe it, because you can function off of somebody else's beliefs, but you do not ascribe to them.
Yes.
So then you look at the reality around you, and rather than accepting that it is, you say it shouldn't be this way, and then all of a sudden you build up a wall. So you have to do something extreme because you can't go forward because you built the wall up that it can't change.
You're stuck.
Yeah. Yes. So when you hear the shoulds, look at the shoulds and then ask yourself why.
And that's what, like what Ms. Lynette was talking about, I think number one, the different ways to reduce dissonance. First of all, it said change your attitude, change your behavior, change the belief. So it sounds really easy. I mean, if I'm in there in your therapy and my belief is we're not supposed to do religion or politics. How do we do this? So if my belief is so a religious belief that I learned as a child, and for some reason it's not working for me as an adult because I'm questioning validity.
Right.
How do I do that? What do I do? What do I change? Do I change that belief? That core belief? What do I change?
Okay, I'm thinking of a specific example. There's we're going to say monogamy, having one partner. Those who've been in a relationship who then decide that they want an open relationship.
Like polyamorous?
Yes.
With many people, not just one.
So then they decide they want to have relationships outside of marriage, and so then they're faced with this, well, I got married with the understanding of one relationship, and now changed, because people change sometimes as we change our beliefs or change where we're at, and they decide they want multiple partners. So now they're in this environment that's not going to work well. In which case, for me, I think it's kind of talking through to understand what's more important to them. We look at every action, every belief has a consequence, good and bad.
Right.
So we look at consequences. What consequences would you rather have out of these situations? What's worth taking the decision to take the step to stay? What's worth taking the step to leave? It's deciding what's the most important priorities, maybe.
So how does my attitude or belief have to change for that to no longer be in dissonance?
Sometimes if wanting something, let's say, okay, if they can't keep the marriage because one person wants to go out of it, the belief changing of, though I might want this, the belief of the marriage and wanting the marriage more is a choice. And once I take responsibility for that as a choice that I'm making, not something I'm forced to do, a lot of times that will kind of create this ownership of it, and less dissonance.
Okay.
which goes into acquiring new information. You really have to dig at it
Yeah.
to outweigh or overweigh the dissonance that has manifested within the relationship. And that's what you're driving at now, is to acquire that relationship, to really bring you back to those core beliefs, if that is what you're trying to do, to become centered and grounded again. It's finding that information to support it.
Is that why you guys do those date nights and trying to refocus back on the relationship? Is you're trying to reprioritize the relationship versus all these other people being brought into the relationship?
That's part of what I feel like that's what part of what we explore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because as you said, Tiffany, we as we get older, we hope to grow, we hope to evolve, we hope to develop into a stronger, better version of ourselves than we were the day before. And sometimes within relationships, one person will grow in a different direction other than their partner.
True.
And thus you have this divide. So if you think about it, 22-year-old self is quite different from 32-year-old self. 32-year-old self is definitely different from 42-year-old self, and it goes on from there. So if two people aren't growing in the same direction, and we're talking about this relationship again with the narcissist and the borderline starts to grow, develop, and come into her own, and the narcissist can't quite figure it out, what's going on.
It changes the dynamics, almost changes the agreement of the beginning relationship.
Yes.
So unless you grow together, you grow apart.
It's possible to grow apart if you don't grow together, but here's the thing. Once you recognize that you're growing apart, it's at that point that you stop and say, what do we do now? And reevaluate, reassess where you are with those goals. Because our goals that we started out with at 20-something, life happens. They may change or fall off the table altogether, and we start looking at something else.
But the narcissist is not likely to see that because they don't see past themselves.
No.
So
And
they
it's
don't.
a lot of trouble in the relationship.
And so in that particular relationship, as the borderline grows, the narcissist maintains and is never aware that they're growing apart. And then no matter how often they're told, they're not aware. And then one day they wake up and there's just no more.
The borderline is gone. But it's with that, again, it's a progressiveness that must take place because it doesn't happen overnight. We've seen where clients have been in some very unhealthy relationships, and they knew that they were unhealthy relationships. But until, sick and tired of being sick and tired is enough for them to leave, they stay. But they have to get to that point. They have to reach that point on their own. It can't be forced or infused. It has to happen and happen here and here. Otherwise, it doesn't manifest at all because that narcissist is so strong.
In behavioral therapy, they talk about something called spontaneous recovery. It was like if you had quit smoking and then there was a particularly difficult day and then you started smoking again, that spontaneous recovery had occurred, falling off the wagon entirely. I would see that there could be a spontaneous recovery with cognitive dissonance. If the behavior is smoking and I quit smoking and then I start smoking again because I think the environment is too stressful, and for some reason I think this is going to help me calm down, and I begin smoking again. How does that work therapeutically? Do we just start back up again with our values and beliefs, or do we try something else?
I don't think looking at the trigger that initiated that behavior to start all over again. And I think, again, back to those relationships, a common attitude or behavior with the borderline is fear of being alone. And then finally stepping out and away from the narcissist and being away for a while, but then finding themselves alone, so to speak. And it's so easy to go back to what we're familiar to, what we know. And hence that cycle starts again, that back and forth.
Right.
It starts up all over again. But what was the trigger out there, outside of the relationship going forward, that brought about that sense of panic or urgency to go back to what was comfortable.
I think one of the areas I like to take the what was comfortable is what are you seeking from it? What are you looking to it to fulfill that you feel like it will? Some things that people look to fulfill them I've heard described as bubbles. They look solid, they look pretty, they look appealing on the outside, they look substantial. And then when you get to them, they're empty, they don't give you anything, they don't actually help, they don't feel like they did anything because they didn't. So looking to the purpose of what that was going to do for you, what you were hoping it would do for you over and over again, and finding something else to fill that purpose if it's not what you're going to.
So spontaneous recovery, falling off the wagon, doesn't mean that it's time to quit trying. It doesn't mean that's a failure.
No. In fact, it can help you point to where you actually need to go. It can help point to the root.
Okay, so it's part of the process of getting better. Okay.
And really understanding, just to revisit real quick, that forced compliance within the relationship. You know that it's not what you need. You know that it's unhealthy. You know you shouldn't be there, but forced to comply with something, and I'm not saying forced by way of holding you down physically, but there is a stronghold there that brings about that forced compliance that many don't even realize is happening until they come into therapy, and it causes them to think, why am I here? Why do I stay? And it's not the therapist questioning the client so much as the client beginning to question self. Why am I?
Because that epiphany hits. I'm stuck in a relationship that I'm not happy in. Now what do? I thought I was happy when I walked in this place. I'm not happy anymore. Now fix it.
I think that's a good point though too, because the goal is not to push people out of relationships, even if it's borderline and narcissism. The goal is to find greater peace and intentionality and greater strength in decision making and confidence in it, even if you choose to stay.
Yes. And then I think another big struggle that I've seen here with Miss Debbie is when the narcissist is so resistant to coming in. They are so resistant to coming in because they know that there's someone, I see you. I see, and that's so unsettling for someone to say, I see you. I see you. Narcissists don't like that.
They like to hide in the dark.
Yes.
And if you see what they are and who they are, they don't want to play with you anymore.
And they sense it early on. We have just experienced that a few months ago. They know early on.
First visit.
They know.
Yeah.
They know.
So what would be, I was just taking this a different route, what would be the difference between the borderline and the narcissist if one of their commonalities is often really a lot of insecurity?
What would be the difference between?
So here, cognitive dissonance is more what I hear we're talking about for the borderline, but we don't talk about cognitive dissonance
For the
for the
narcissist,
narcissist.
I agree.
Why not?
That's interesting. Do they have cognitive dissonance, or is it evenly divided? Is it like a homeostatic relationship within the narcissist that I'm in complete equilibrium?
That's almost what I'm hearing in comparison to the borderline has tension, has this
I know my
maturity
values.
needing to change.
I have no discernment of values.
Yeah.
I know them. Oh, that would be the black and white thinking.
Yes.
Oh, the
There
all or
is or
none.
isn't.
Oh, so there would be no dissonance
For the
because
narcissist.
I'm always right.
There we go.
There we are. The solution is so simple. We'll
But
just
it
call
is.
the narcissist.
I think that would be interesting to have a person who's been identified as having narcissistic tendencies, or a full-blown narcissist for that matter, to come in and just really engage with that individual. I mean, that would be something very interesting to see. The complete polar of the borderline, to have that individual in the chair and just hold a conversation.
Oh, that'd be good. So ladies, do we dare? Do we dare start asking for a volunteer with such a diagnosis to come on our podcast that's on YouTube?
Yes, I think so. It would be interesting to see their perspective and point of view because they're never wrong. So to be challenged, the challenge.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm having cognitive dissonance with this idea.
I'm not sure I want to deal with that.
Not sure. I'm going to step into that one.
Oh, that sounds delightful.
But you
That
know,
is
the
so
challenge.
much. That would be so much fun. Oh my.
So, rerouting. Who would you recommend we come in?
Yes, we need to come
Who would you
back.
recommend
Lord.
to come in for counseling? And how would they know that they're having cognitive dissonance? And how would they be like, okay, this is something worth going in for?
Well, in my situation with my population, they usually don't know they have cognitive dissonance.
What is it that you like to know?
Denial.
Okay.
Most of my women come in with denial. Excuse me. Most of my borderlines, when they first come in, it's because they're having a symptom, not because they know what's going on. Their marriage is in trouble. They're not happy. They're never satisfied. They have anger spirals, and they're frustrated all the time. Not happy, angry, depressed, a lot of these different symptoms, and that's why they come in. And then when we start doing our intake and we start going over some procedural questions, and they begin to give more and more characteristics, answering more specific questions, then the picture is started to be painted. And anytime people give you information about themselves, it begets more questions. And so the process itself pretty much will tell you, per DSM-5, what the problem is. Then I usually go into the criteria, characteristics for borderline. And that's when I ask them to read the eggshell book. And then the next time I see them, dissonance is dripping. So usually they come for symptom, and within 2 weeks they have dissonance. And then we resolve the dissonance. And the denial is gone. That's how it kind of works in my world. How does it work in y'all's world?
For me, I had something interesting come across the desk not too long ago. And the dissonance reflected in the assessment. That was new to me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That was new. Based upon the data that came back. We all have, with the assessments, real quick, you have this range of tolerance for, being within normal range, whatever normal is. And then you have the probability of, or just going right into severe.
Mm-hmm.
Seldom do you have any individual to fall below par across the board.
Right.
That is so seldom. And that jumped out at me, and I said, oh my gosh, what is this? And it just spoke out to me, and I'm like, okay, we're either in some serious denial, and this is not to be facetious or cheeky in any way, not at all. But it's that denial that is so powerful, that lends to the dissonance in this instance. And it came forth, in my opinion, in my belief, that the scores reflected what the person was not saying. And it spoke so loudly and so clear. I'm one of those people, and I tell you guys all the time, I focus on what you don't say, opposed to what you do say. I focus on your reactions to things opposed to how everyone else around you may react. Because that's where a lot of information is, in that abstract area that a lot of people may not necessarily pay attention to. But would you agree there's a lot of information in what you don't say, what you don't do that will give it away. And that assessment definitely spoke to me in that, from that perspective.
Mhm.
And again, not to be cheeky, but it's just, that's unheard of. Board, below par, that's not, no.
So what did all that mean to you?
That as human beings, we're all, and it goes back to the dissonance, we are all creatures of fear by way of judgment. None of us like to be judged, good, bad, or indifferent. And being in an environment where the belief is that there is judgment can bring about certain behaviors, when the reality is there is no judgment. It's all about the help. So again, when we start talking about the dissonance of it, there you go. It's that gray area where it's like, okay, no, I know that this is this and that's over there, but that's not me. That's not me. When reality,
It's the denial.
it speaks so loudly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So what can somebody find? What can they hope to find if they're willing to face the dissonance? Because that's a scary place to be, because you feel off-center. You feel almost like you're standing and somebody pushes you off balance. Like, what's the hope? What's the hope that can be found to face the dissonance? And the
Clarity.
symptoms? Okay.
I think clarity, I think solutions.
Yeah.
Once you get past the dissonance, you're looking at, like you said, changing the beliefs, changing the attitudes.
The behaviors.
Behaviors will ultimately change when you change the first two. Knowledge can give you this amazing amount of power that leads you to think differently and to interpret differently. And just that type of knowledge that this imparts in the therapeutic realm, it can just change someone's outlook completely.
Sure.
And we know through research that if I'm thinking positively, I'm acting positively. We know that if using the all or none law with neurons, we know that I can be positive, I can reroute to negative, I can restructure to positive, my choice. So why would you stay in denial and negativity and anger when you can simply choose to reroute that? It's a little confusing as to why people would stay there. And it takes a little bit of time, and it takes a lot of effort, because it's not easy.
No.
But the long-term effects of it are phenomenal.
I like that. It's coming to embracing that truth about yourself. And I think with many of us, it's just being human. To embrace the truth about self can be scary.
Terrifying.
But just think about how much empowerment one can gain from really knowing self, the authentic self, the rawest form, that vulnerable underbelly that terrifies us. We all have this Teflon exterior, at least we believe we do. But when that's exposed, or we think that it's about to be exposed, there's a crack to it, that petrifies us.
It does.
But there's power in that. Being able to recognize it and say, okay, where do I go now?
So many people
Forge forward.
live by fear. They're governed by fear. They go to work because they're afraid to not pay their bills. They stay in a marriage because they're afraid to be alone. They eat Brussels sprouts, yuck, because they're afraid if they don't get this amount of antioxidants, then this is going to happen to them. And I just don't like Brussels sprouts. I tried them broiled. Oh my gosh. Anyway, whew. So, but only immense fear would make me try to eat them. And so, I think that if we can assuage the fear, and the automatic counter dialectic of fear is faith. And so faith is positivity, fear is negativity. Boom. It sounds so simple.
But we know that it's not. It's
It's
process.
not, right?
And it's getting there. It's getting there, and sometimes that thought process, it's difficult or it's a challenge to get there. It's not impossible, but it takes work.
It takes work, and it takes a therapist who knows how to do it.
Yeah.
I was just to chat. I was told by one of our interns that, and she comes from up north, like around Wyoming territory. She was saying that when she went in to the hospital for some eating disorders, that she was exposed to DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, which we've done some segments on that. And these guys are almost finished with their DBT intern therapy stuff. But DBT is a bit complicated. There's a lot to it, but it's amazing, totally amazing, life-changing. So this particular person thought she knew what DBT was because it was thrown around at the hospitals that she was in this DBT group. She had a DBT therapist, blah, 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 DBT, DBT, DBT. Well, she comes here and she looks at the guide that you guys use, Linehan's guide for DBT. She looks at that. She says, I don't know this stuff. I said, really? But you've been DBT'd, you know, and definitely you've been DBT'd. I don't know this. She looks through, she says, I did that page. There was maybe 4 pages in the book they did.
Yeah.
And I asked her what was done in addition to that. Oh, we handed them in. All right. Well, Dr. Linehan, if you're watching this, I am so sorry about that, but that's what they call DBT. And the DBT therapists, they were not certified in DBT. And so I bring that to say that if you are working with a real DBT therapist, someone who has been trained and certified, and they have credentials to show this, so you ask them about it. If they have been trained and certified, then you're going to be able to achieve what we're talking about. I don't want you to go into a setting with a therapist who may not represent appropriately and you think you're doing DBT and you're not. Because then you're going to be very upset that it doesn't work.
Yes.
And you're going to say, why did these ladies at Counseling Solutions tell me to do this? Because it doesn't work. And so we're telling you, it does work if you get a certified therapist, somebody who knows what they're doing. And the changes that it makes in people's lives, their quality of life
Improves.
It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. So it's definitely worth your time to think about this, because dissonance is a very intense concept. But dissonance is a dialectic. It's the opposites of one concept. It's the good and the bad of the concept, the positive and the negative. And so it's about that resolution.
You may even find it.
And that's the best thing in problem solving that we can do, is trying to rewrite, reprogram to more positive. I like it.
I do too. I think this was a great session today to go over cognitive dissonance, because a lot of folks don't know.
Yeah.
And you may experience it and not even know that you're experiencing it.
Right.
Yeah.
And to have it brought to the forefront in a forum such as this, where it is somewhat light, but it is informative, and it begs the question, it brings about thought. And that's the whole purpose, is to initiate thought.
To initiate thought. And I know the feeling of feeling. I know how it feels to believe that you're conflicted, but not know why.
Absolutely.
And that would be another symptom that would bring you to therapy,
Yes.
and not even understanding where it comes from.
This was good. I hope our folks out there have enjoyed today's segment on cognitive dissonance and really gained an understanding, because I know I had fun, all this stuff.
Yeah, it is fun to sit over here and talk to y'all. We'd like to hear from you.
Yes.
We get a couple of emails every now and then. You know, appreciate them.
Keep them coming.
Keep them coming, but please feel free to offer some topics that you might like to have a little bit of presentation on. We could bring you some data, bring you some facts, lots of opinions.
Mm-hmm. We like research too. We like research.
Lynette likes
I like
research.
research.
Lynette likes testing.
I do. I do.
Tiffany doesn't even need notes. She's amazing.
Yes.
I mean, she's just good.
Yes.
Yeah. Me, I'm having some dissonance.
I'm trying to figure it out. Every day I'm trying to figure it out.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good weekend. Until next time.
Bye-bye.